what's brewing?
Hello and welcome to Lykke Coffee Farms. I'm Sara Steele.
And I'm Lars Pillengreen.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about how Lykke came about and what we actually do here at the coffee roastery and with our farms and everything like that. So for those of you who don't know who Lykke Coffee Farms are, we own our own farms around the globe and we roast our own coffee in Sweden. But I'm not going to do most of the talking today. I feel like I'm going to ask you, the expert, the coffee expert, the questions and, take it from there.
I think it's the first thing that sort of comes to people's mind is that, oh wow, why do they own their own farms and why would we want to buy coffee from their own farms? And that's literally just a small piece of the project, because I like to see it Lykke Coffee Farms as a whole, as a big project where our farms is just one means to the greater picture, where our farms can work as role model farms, where we can basically implement different techniques in how to best work the farms and how to best prune, how to fertilize, and how to sort of use that as a tool and as a sort of educational center, and that way we can communicate with farmers in the close proximity surrounding us, and to teach them how to produce better coffee and how to produce more coffee on their trees. So,
but if we start from the beginning, like how did Lykke start, and what's your background?
Yeah. Basically, it sort of come out of the idea that I've been working in coffee and I've been a green buyer of green coffee for over a decade now, and it used to work with a different company and was traveling back and forth all over the planet, basically chasing good coffees and building really great relationships with producers. And what I sort of very often found was that I was able to travel quite a lot. I basically spent hundreds of days on the year just traveling, but nevertheless I was still only a visitor when I was traveling. So I came back a couple of times of the year to each farm that we worked with, but I sort of felt that I wasn't really on the inside of it. And having that in mind, I was just like, also I had a growing interest that I love growing vegetables and farming things. So the idea sort of came about basically as a like, wow, it would be nice to have a piece of land in Latin America where we can grow some of the most amazing coffees, and that's sort of the sort of where it took off. And I got Johan, our partner, on board, our CEO, and a couple of other people as well, and we started planting that with coffee, that piece of land in El Salvador, and I lived there for a couple of months, 3 months, and I started obviously spending a lot of time on the farm. I realized that all of our closest neighbors are all farmers of coffee, and they basically rely on the local market as their sort of buyer. And with fluctuating prices, that sort of relates to the market price. And they didn't have any of this sort of long-term perspective into who buys their coffee. So their coffee was just taken off with the local buyer that sort of passes by.
What do you mean by long-term?
Like sort of having one connection, that somebody that they can work with year by year and that they sort of build a relationship with. So and at the same time, we can literally see that most farmers in these regions, they produce quite low average yields on their coffee trees, meaning that their coffee trees, they don't produce as much as they could be. So, and that's usually the most significant proof of lack of education. Like if they get better know-how, they can improve their yields, and they can improve obviously their yields translates to their yearly income. So not even only buying and paying more for the coffee, we can help them produce more coffee. And that was sort of the ripple effects of me spending a couple of months there, was that if we can connect with these guys and we can be their long-term buyer, we can also be their support, because we will have an agronomist that work in our team that tends to our farm, and he has a university degree in agronomy, and he knows all the botanics, all the aspects of coffee. So he can start teaching these guys surrounding us. And that is literally sort of the embryo of where Lykke then came to be, because then I realized that that's where we're going to be making real impact in not only just growing our own coffee, but more in towards actually tending to and helping farmers in our area produce better coffee and produce more of it, that we can also tie the loop by buying their coffee and represent it in the market. So El Salvador became El Salvador, Peru, Brazil, and Uganda, and obviously a lot happened. A lot came with the pandemic. We had great ideas of what we wanted to do, and then basically the whole world sort of shut down in March of 2020, and right at the same time when we were about to launch Lykke as a brand. And so we had projects that we just started in Peru and in El Salvador and in Brazil and in Uganda, and none of them were because all these countries were just blocked and closed lockdown. So we were just...
So what happened?
Yeah, we were... Obviously, everything was like a big handbrake, just try to survive, like everybody was. I mean, the whole planet was experiencing this. And obviously we couldn't develop any of the projects in any of the countries. So we were just like, okay, what can we do with... Fortunately, we have, in our model, we had already collected a couple of, local staff that were attached to our team and to our mission. And so obviously they were landlocked but on the other side of the planet, in El Salvador, for instance, or in Uganda. So we were able to make some movements, even though not to the same extent as obviously we had planned to. But we hung in there, and by, I would say, mid-21, when things started opening up again, that's when we started really moving further with a lot of projects. And I would say one of the biggest things that we've been putting a lot of effort into and developing quite a lot is the project that we have in Uganda, which is a project together with a dear friend of mine, Ben Carlson, and his Long Miles Coffee, that has vast experience from producing coffee in Burundi, and then also We Effect, which is a Swedish non-profit organization that they're a Swedish non-profit organization that are owned and operated by Konsumentföreningen, which is the consumer union in Sweden. And it's really good to have them on board, because they come with perspectives and add perspectives that we wouldn't necessarily see being coffee people. So
if you would tell a new person about Lykke, what we actually do and what our mission stands for, coming to sustainability and ethical work, and our roastery in Stockholm and all the different farms that we have and how they work, what would you say?
So Lykke Coffee Farms, we exist to make scalable impact for coffee farmers, to make real impact for coffee farmers. We're in specialty, we're buying really good high-end qualities, and we want to develop those coffees so that we can have more of it, and we can make sure that producers they produce more of coffee, and to a better quality level, so that they can make and live off of the money that they make from coffee. Because what we see is that coffee is on a decline. It's like, if you look at coffee and you look at climate change, for instance, coffee is not going to be the thing it is today in 20-30 years, because we're going to be lacking a lot of space where Arabica, high quality Arabica is grown. So we're going to have to think differently. We're going to have to make sure that we produce coffee within the ecosystems, so we don't put limits on it. But more, so I would say that Lykke Coffee Farms is really about the farmer. It's really about connecting the consumer with the farmer. So in our model, we're able to operate our own role model farms, have a school of communication, education. We can have coffee scouts that are basically trained by agronomists that are teaching farmers how to best tend to the trees, how to best pick the red ripe cherries, And we can process that coffee into excellent, high quality coffee and bring that directly to the consumer market. So that's in a nutshell what we do. And it's obviously a lot more complex when you start adding all the layers into it and you look at the different origins that come with different prerequisites and also different challenges.
So what do you think is the main benefit for us at Lykke, having this close relationship with the farmers and being there 365 days a year, and also having our roastery in Stockholm and actually packaging the coffee?
It's actually like it's for me it's that point as well that I spoke to in the beginning, is that when I in a previous setting I was only a buyer. I was only visiting once or twice or 3 times a year. But with this, we're putting ourselves in the driver's seat. So we're basically we're taking full charge of things. So we're in better control, but it also comes with added responsibility. Because these farmers that all of a sudden we don't have anyone in between ourselves, the consumer market, and the farmer. That's literally our point of view. That's we are. And that comes with the responsibility of also helping the farmer how to improve, and also telling the farmer what has been done good and what can be done better, like how to improve. And that responsibility is something that I don't really take for granted. It's not the word I was looking for, but it's something that I feel very, very strong about, because it's something that, like, telling the farmer, like, this is your coffee, this is how we evaluate it, and this is what you can improve by doing the drying differently or by picking the cherries differently, and all of that sort of feedback. It is really, really important, and we're literally on the front end with the farmer, helping them. So as an example, a couple of weeks ago I was in El Salvador with Rafael, our agronomist, and I went to see a couple of farmers, and some of these farmers are producing some of the best lots of coffee in El Salvador, really high up in the mountains. But when you start looking at how much they produce of that coffee, it's really like the low production, and you start looking at how the trees are doing. They're really lush and really green, but they don't produce much cherries. So right on the spot, Rafael can tell them like a couple of different techniques on how they can make sure that the trees are going to improve their production next year, and that's a quite a drastic thing. If you can make the farmer produce twice as much coffee, then obviously you have doubled their income, the yearly income. That's a quite significant impact.
So how does it work for us? Because obviously we have our own farms, and to ensure the quality of the coffee that we produce and that we buy basically from ourselves. But it's not really the focus on our own farms, is it? Because we only build up the model farms, and then we include our neighboring farmers and buy from them as well.
Exactly, and that's the. I mean, if we were to only focus on our own farms, we would need to buy so much land, and we need to plant so much coffee if we want to make any impact or any scale. But we wouldn't make any social impact or financial impacts in the communities. So rather, what we want is that our farms is small. We don't need much land, but we need land so that we're able to operate a processing facility, so we can process coffee from our neighbors. And we also need a garden where we can trial and error, where basically we can test the different types of Arabica that we feel this region might be suitable for, or where we can try different techniques in processing, like if we want to dry these coffees like this, or we can just the distance between trees when we're planting. Like, for instance, is a huge difference if you can plant 4,000 trees or 2,500 trees in a 1 hectare of land, because it's basically you can almost double the production just by adding and looking at how the density between trees and what type of shade trees. There's so many things that we can do, and having our own role model farm for that is also not adding that risk on the producer. Like, we're not saying to the producer, like, you need to do this or you need to do, but rather, like, we're trying this, and this seems to work really, really well. So you can also try this.
So we're teaching our neighbors.
It's a long-term game. And I mean, coffee, I think if you ask anybody that works in coffee farming, it's basically everything you want to do is like a 10-year project. So it's nothing that you calculate your quick returns on, but it's a long-term perspective.
Yeah, because I'm always curious about how these farmers have been doing this for generations, obviously, with these type of techniques that are kind of working, but could be better. Like, how do they receive the education and the knowledge that we come in with as, non-natives, and we come there and...
And that's part of it. Like, if we look at the context of Uganda, for instance, where we have, this year we're going to have 15 what we call coffee scouts, and these guys are local people, youth, young people that, they're boys and girls that live in the region. They have a moped or like a small motorcycle, and they are taught by our lead agronomist, the basics and the first things that they need to teach farmers. And these guys then they can move around the mountains on their bikes, and they can go to see 5 or 10 different farmers every day, and start working with these. Like, okay, so how do you tend to your trees? You have 200 trees in your garden. Okay, what do the trees look like? Collect all the data points, and we can look at how much coffee are they producing on those 200 trees today. And then when we start implementing the different techniques and improving those techniques for the farmers, then we can look at the next year. How much are they producing now? And then in the coming years, we can hopefully we'll see that sort of incremental significant scaling. And we've seen that like with proof of concept from Ben's previous business in Burundi, and already with some of the farmers that we work with in Uganda. We did a small pilot project that we called the 555, where we basically selected 5 coffee farmers, and we selected 5 trees of their farms, and we taught them 5 best practices of coffee, which includes mulching, pruning, fertilizing. It's 5 different basically techniques. And when these 5 farmers, when they started implicating these 5 best practices on these 5 trees, we can see significant difference compared to the remaining trees in the farms already year 1. So the techniques are there, and we just need to teach a lot of people about them. And we started our first day of operation was September 4th last year in 22. And come 1 year, we've already trained over 1,500 farmers in Uganda.
Wow.
Which is quite an impact.
Okay, so since our mission from our farms in the origin countries are to kind of help our neighboring farmers and educate them to farm better and to actually produce more coffee. And so what happens with the farmers who have monocultures? Isn't that kind of a mission impossible, or is that just a really long journey of trying to make things better?
It's a very good question. No, but the thing and our mission is to make impact, and obviously make impact for farmers. And I mean, one be it the financial aspect and the social aspect, but then also the environmental aspect is obviously, if we want to count on coffee being able to produce in the next coming 30, 40 years, we drastically need to change the way coffee is grown. And it's a fact, like the majority of coffee, for instance, in Brazil is grown in monocultural farms, where it's simply just coffee, lines of coffee, dogs and coffee. And
we invited the dogs
to the talk, yeah.
To the talk now.
But it's good. But then, so I mean, like having just coffee in a farm is not good, because it doesn't create biodiversity. It's monocultural, so it will only be a system that is heavily dependent on the kind of inputs that you put for that coffee.
And sorry to butt in, but just to explain, a monoculture is when you grow only one type of crop.
Yeah. So farms that are just growing coffee, that doesn't grow any shade trees, or that doesn't grow any other types of beans or whatever. Like basically the opposite of that is a farm, for instance, like Clayton's farm in Brazil, where he tends to the farm in a regenerative. It's called syntropic, like agroforestry, where he lets the nature play the most vital part and the vital role of the farming, So everything that he grows within the farm, it's coffee, it's bananas, it is different types of fruit trees, it's different types of beans, and all of these, they contribute to create an ecosystem within his farm that makes everything more resilient. And I mean, if you look at the types of problems that you get with monocultural farms, is that you're very left out to different types of diseases or different types of natural causes. Could be drought or could be frost or whatever. But the more diversity you have within that farm, the more resilient will the farm be. So what we tend to look at with farmers that are doing a monocultural type of agriculture today is that we little by little try to increase their diversity. Like, okay, let's say we tell the farmer to, if you start planting cover crops in between on the ground in between the rows of coffee, that's going to keep the humidity of the soil. And then next phase could be that, okay, every 10th line of coffee trees we plant a shade tree. And obviously that's going to take a couple of years before it gives any sufficient significant shade, but it's all those little by little, step by step things that we're going to be taking with these farmers that have them be more resilient and try to diversify their farms better.
But how are they perceiving those kind of tips? Because obviously they've built a monoculture to begin with for various different reasons. It must be somewhat efficient. So if we come in and tell them, oh, you need to take away, say, 5 to 10 coffee trees, instead put in this massive...
No, and that's obviously, I mean, the whole system, and that goes to the whole food system, like the agricultural food system that we have on this planet, is that everything has been maximized to efficiency. Like, we need to produce as much as possible on as little input as possible and to as little cost as possible. So that makes the whole system is made up to just produce volume.
Which is a vicious circle, obviously, right?
Which is a vicious circle, because if you produce more volume, then you need to put more inputs. But if you cannot really make any money on a small production, then you need to increase that production in order to make any money, and it's just a spiral. So what we obviously, with the first thing it always starts with is paying more for the coffee. Like, everybody needs to pay more for coffee to make a farmer being able to live off of the coffee that he produces or she produces. But then it's also those incremental things, is that we don't want to force farmers to go, hey, you need to start doing this fully organic by tomorrow, like otherwise, and because that's drastically just going to kill the plant. It's basically because all those plants, they've been living off of maybe artificial inputs like synthetic fertilizer, and they've been in full sun all day, and then all of a sudden you put a shade tree there, and you start feeding it with nothing, basically, because it's going to be like this organic farm. And then obviously those trees are not going to make it. So it needs to be step by step, and we need farmers to understand that this is a way we can make it into the future. And what we actually, it's getting, I would say, like with climate change being so prominent right now, we see it in each of the single origins that we work with. Farmers really feel the effects of climate change already today. And science tells us that it's going to be a lot worse in 20, 30 years from now. So farmers are really open to the message.
Yeah.
Because they feel the climate change really happening, and they fear it, and so they really know that they need to make something different to be able to survive with coffee for tomorrow.
Because I bet that's been kind of I wouldn't say an issue, but somewhat strain. Because sometimes these kind of things can put pressure on the actual farmer as well. Not you're saying that the crop could, it's pressure for the crop to actually survive this kind of change, but also for a farmer.
That's the biggest part with our role model farm, is that's the purpose of that, is that's where that's our experimental box. That's where we can test these things. Like, what's the variety in this of Arabica in this region that is suitable for tomorrow, if the climate change seems to take it down this path. Can we grow this type of Caturra, or is it Bourbon, or what is it Pacamara, or do we need to do a hybrid variety that is more resistant to coffee leaf rust or whatever? But in all those aspects, if we have that farm, that's basically where we can try those things, and then alleviate that risk from the producer, because we don't want to add that risk to the producer.
So if we would put this all together into a short kind of what's it called?
Message.
Short message about who Lykke are and how we work and what our business model is. What would you say if you had 2 minutes to say it?
All right, so Lykke Coffee Farms, we're in business to make some impact for coffee farmers. We run our own farms as role model farms in the areas that we work with, and we connect with close-up neighboring producers, and we bring their coffee. We either process it ourselves, or we just cater to the market for them, and we bring it all the way to the consumer market by roasting it and packaging it in beautiful design bags.
Wow, that was less than 2 minutes.
It's less than 2 minutes, doesn't it? Miss?
For sure.
Less than a minute. No, but yeah. And then I
think that sums it up, actually.
Yeah.
I have a question. Why should anyone pay a little bit more for a cup of coffee?
So the not so fun but fun fact is that coffee is priced at a level today as it was 50 years ago. And that's not with taking in inflation. It's like you look at dollar for dollar. It's the same price today basically as it was in the 1970s. So that's pretty weird, right? It doesn't really add up. So
how is that even possible?
And that's because we've been scaling the business to efficiency. So we are able to produce a lot more on the same effort.
Yeah.
And and again, that's the vicious sort of cycle of things. So today we produce a lot more coffee, and it's apparently according to the market, it's valued at the same price.
So that's why we should pay a little bit more.
That's why we definitely should pay a little.
That is sustainable and good for the environment.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff.
And to make sure that the farmer has an income that makes the farmer wants to stay in coffee, because otherwise we're not going to be having any coffee farmers tomorrow.
That's very good wisdom. Very good. Okay, well, thank you for listening in. Anyone who's been watching or listening.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.